So we just had the Menendez brothers retrial, or it was a hearing to follow up on this imprisonment. These Menendez brothers were convicted of murdering their parents back in the crime itself took place in 1989 here in Los Angeles. And eventually, after a bunch of waiting and courts and ins and outs and delays, they were sentenced to the life imprisonment in 1996, I believe. And from there, there's been nothing done about the case. Now, why is this case important? Well, there was more to the story than we kind of understood at the time. And I'm going to talk you guys through this. But first, here's the report about what happened here at the hearing that just happened in Van Nuys. And this could be good news for the brothers. So let's look at the first report, and then we'll talk it through, guys.
Prison for the murder of their parents. Lyle and Eric Menendez are now eligible for parole. An LA judge resentenced the brothers to 50 years to life, replacing their original life without parole sentence. The judge said he did not believe they posed unreasonable risk if released. It's a ruling which makes them immediately eligible for parole. The state's parole board will now have to find them suitable for release. That's a process that is subject to review by California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Okay, so it looks like the Menendez brothers are eligible for parole now after this hearing went down here in Van Nuys, and there were no reporters allowed to be, no filming allowed inside. So we had a team that was set up outside. We weren't able to get the footage because it was exclusive for TRT, so we weren't able to legally have the footage, but they were set up outside, had some interviews with some of the family members. And I think the main thing that went down that we were told was that there were 20 new witnesses that were being allowed to speak. That number got reduced to 7. The 7 witnesses are family members, people that have known the Menendez brothers their whole lives, and were in the original trial were not allowed to say anything on the stand. So that testimony is brand new, and the judge did allow 7 new family members to speak on behalf of the Menendez brothers. The issue that changes everything in this case is child abuse, sexual abuse, rape, all these things that were not really allowed to be discussed without massive judgment on people, especially young men. That's the difference of the dialogue that we had here in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s to now. And that's changed because the new generation is more willing to look and talk about these things and understand more how power works. And it's not just physical. Power can be a place of power, taking advantage of somebody not in power. That can be a man or a woman at any age, really. But generally, children are more susceptible to that. And women generally have been more susceptible as well. But men are too. This is something that the new generation, the TikTok generation, understands. We didn't understand that back then. That's the difference. I'll talk more about that in a second, but let's look closely at what happened here. And this is NPR's kind of breaks it down a little. The Menendez brothers are one step closer to freedom. What to know about their case. So the Menendezes, who spent more than 3 decades in prison for fatally shooting their parents in Beverly Hills, were resentenced Tuesday, one step closer to freedom. The day-long hearing, which happened on Tuesday, the judge has reduced their sentences from life in prison without parole to 50 years to life, making them eligible for parole. That was the point, to reduce it. So they're not saying they're innocent. It's saying 50 years, not life. Now you have an opportunity to get parole. So this hasn't happened yet, but they set the table for it to happen. Okay. Now the brothers, again, we'll go through the timeline here. They were found guilty in 96. The parents, Katie and Jose Menendez, very powerful Mongols, Beverly Hills. Jose Menendez was a entertainment industry, music industry mogul that had a lot of power. And of course, they were extremely wealthy. Eric was 18, Lyle was 21. So obviously they were clearly tried as adults. That was not even a question. They said it was self-defense. And then this is the part that didn't sit well with the juries and with the public, is the sexual abuse by their father, and that they actually feared for their lives. So again, if you're not understanding how that works, then you're going to assume that two athletic, healthy, young adults, 18 and 21, would be able to stand up to their dad and not let that happen. I think that was the narrative that kind of allowed itself to kind of come through. Another part of that narrative was that because they're coming from wealth, that's another element of privilege, and we wanted to punish those people for thinking they could just get away with their privilege, which was also about the timing. This happened right after OJ's conviction. That's very important in the timeline, because OJ getting off of conviction. So he was acquitted moments before their trial picked up again in 95. 96 is when the guilty verdict was found. So if you guys understand the timeline and what was going on here in LA at the time, it was a very, very emotionally charged society at the time here. We were reacting, not acting. Everybody was reacting to the previous thing. So you had the Rodney King situation where we recognized police brutality was an actual thing, caught on camera for the first time. We didn't have camera phones clearly back in 1992. So 92, we had the LA riots, right? So let me talk this through for you guys. So 89 was the murder of the Menendez parents. No trial yet. They were just they were kind of, it took a while for them to get the trial started because they had to look for the murderers. The kids did well with hiding about it, that they had actually done it, because they were lying about it at first, and then So after that, you had the Rodney King happen. That was in 1992, where once the footage came out, people were furious. The cops went on trial. They were all let off. The city went up in flames. So there was a definite need to say there's police brutality against minorities and it needs to be solved. So the next case was OJ. So you guys see, now we have to punish the system that allowed the cops to walk away from Rodney King. We're going to punish them by letting OJ off, even though everybody knew he did it, because OJ's black. Turns out we got that wrong too, because OJ was elite and he was living in Brentwood, which is very close. Very close. He was practically neighbors with the Menendez, who hadn't had their trial yet. The trial had been delayed because of OJ. So if you look at this timeline, OJ walks, and now our city of LA now has to have another conversation about, it's not black and white. It's the rich and powerful versus the poor. So the Menendez, unfortunately, their trial came up once it finally happened, 95, 96, when the conviction happened. That was a punishment against the elite. They were part of the elite. Therefore, you can't let your elite status allow you to walk away from murder when clearly you killed your parents. And nobody wanted to talk about child abuse. Now you guys understand the timeline. Let's see if I missed anything in this article. This is part. Okay, so they bring this up. The Netflix documentary, which came out just after the series, in 2024, they came out one at a time. First, there was it was a mini series that goes through the timeline of this. It's actually a pretty good series. I would actually recommend you guys watch it. I think it's better than the documentary. The documentary itself, it's okay, but this is what got us to today. The hearing that happened on Tuesday was a result not just of the documentary and the Netflix show existing. It was a result of the response. And like I said earlier, the response to this story is different with a younger crowd that wasn't alive in 1989 when the Menendez brothers killed their parents. They can respond now to the documentary, respond to what they see on Netflix, because all that stuff, it's not, look, you could say that it was a little over dramatic in the series, but in the documentary, it's pretty clear. It pretty much spells out the stuff I'm talking about. It has, now obviously not everybody's on the side with the brothers. They said, we don't care if you were abused, you have to pay for your crimes. So they definitely take all the sides and allow them to speak. But the thing is, the TikTok generation said, no, we need a retrial. We need to get these guys. They've served their time. need to come out. We understand how child abuse works. We understand how sexual abuse works. We understand how rape works. We understand how power works. That's the missing piece. Power works in a way that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we didn't understand. I think even though the Me Too movement went far, it started to become political. There was something to, wait a minute, when somebody holds your life in their hands as far as your well-being, your job, your living situation, your public persona, your everything, basically everything that makes you who you are. When somebody holds all that, all those cards, you kind of have to keep your mouth shut and go along with things, because if you don't, you're going to lose those things. And so there's a thing about abuse of power that comes into play. Even if you were two rich boys, with your parents, living the life of luxury in Beverly Hills, you still have this power dynamic that eventually the kids snapped and killed their parents. I don't think anybody's denying that part, although they do think that maybe these guys had just wanted it for kicks. They wanted to do it and wanted to get the money. But they already, I mean, that's also another theory. But anyways, the point is, re-looking at this case, it looks like that the table has been set for the Menendez brothers being able to be released because of being able to make parole. And that would be something that I think a lot of people would celebrate. Now, not everybody would celebrate this. Not everybody would celebrate this. Here's some bad takes. I mean, I give them a chance to give their take, but this is what we saw after the hearing. Eric and Lyle Menendez are the best argument for capital punishment ever. Literally lying and wait and killing their parents to get their money. And now goofballs want to let them out. 100% chance someone will try the same with Nicholas Cruz when they think everyone has forgot. So, there's a lot of different takes on this. Here's another couple of them. Fisher King says the Menendez brothers, who shotgunned their parents in brutal fashion and then spent months living it up on their dime, are about to get parole because stupid white women are obsessed with true crime podcasts. But Derek Chauvin, who didn't do anything, rots in jail. That's another topic. Okay. Notorious SEB says says a cool thing that is happening in America is that if you are a notorious murderer, all you need to do is get a Netflix to make a documentary about you. You'll probably get out of jail soon. Menendez brothers committed an unforgivable crime in cold blood. They're not changing their mind on that. But the sentiment outside the courtroom, that's the part that needs to be reported on. Here in LA, the sentiment looked more like this. And this is a Twitter account literally called Menendez Legacy, Fighting for Justice. These were the shots of the close family and friends, people that had been waiting years for this. It was a big moment. It was an emotional moment. It was a day, as they say in the tweet, it was a day filled with hope. After 35 years of heartbreak, the Menendez and Anderson families finally felt a spark of healing, smiling through tears, holding each other close. Their love never wavered and will stand with them until Eric and Lyle are free. And the hashtag is Justice for Eric and Lyle. I would recommend everybody check out the Netflix series and the documentary if you want the backstory to this, especially if you weren't alive back then. But I'm telling you guys, it's very important to understand the timeline. These are the elements. These are the things that are important with any story that we're quick to pass judgment. We're quick to have these strong opinions. We always need to look at historical context. I'm telling you, as somebody I've lived in LA since 2001. I wasn't actually here in the 90s and the early 80s, but I've taken time to study it. I know when I arrived here in 2001, there was still this feeling in the air about what LA went through with the LA riots of 1992. There was still something in the air about that. This unsettledness, the understanding that OJ was walking, but that was a punishment to the system that allowed the Rodney King assault members of the LAPD, which, by the way, now we know LAPD trains in Israel. So go figure. We're understanding a lot more about historical context now, aren't we? We're figuring it out. Where does all that aggressive behavior come from? You have to beat the shit out of somebody who was driving while they were high and you pulled them over. You got him, dude. Rodney King, driving while intoxicated. You got him to pull over. Why do you have to beat the shit out of him? Why do you got to do that? Well, that's the training. Okay, so we understand there was a problem. The town went up in flames because these cops got to walk. We punished the system by letting OJ walk, even though we know OJ killed him. And OJ killed Nicole and Ron in cold blood. He was a total sociopath. There's plenty of evidence of that. But you let him go because it was an FU to the system that let the cops walk. Then you lock up Menendez Brothers because you have to punish the elite, because OJ turns out he wasn't part of the people. He was part of the elite. And he was the token black guy that got to parade around and pretend he was representing the minority communities in LA. So it's all about following the timeline. And now, luckily, we have a new generation on TikTok who get curious, who ask questions, who do a little digging, who do a little research. They're not just sitting back watching a show on Netflix and coming up with their opinion. The show on Netflix gets them curious. They didn't know about the Menendez brothers. Now they are curious. Guess what? Then they go to their keyboard and they start looking some shit up. We used to have to go to the public library to look stuff up. They can actually look it up right in front of their own hands on their own screen. And they do that. And they ask the right questions and they come back and they demand that this case gets looked at again, which it just did. So as far as I'm concerned, we're on the right track to obtain justice for people who deserve it. No matter where they come from, everybody needs a fair shot at justice. That's what we're about here on the Homeless Left. And again, I hope you get curious enough to look into this story yourself and come up with your mind on your own. We'll keep an eye on it. And we hope that the Menendez brothers are able to walk free sometime soon in the near future. We're rooting for them. And as they said in this post, hashtag justice for Eric and Lyle.